Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need to do roll call. It's not on the agenda.
Yeah, it is on the Pledge of Allegiance, way at the top.
Do I ever have the same agenda as you?
No.
I'm getting old. Mr. Schulte.
Here, do you want to use these?
Yeah, I probably will. Mr. Helmers.
Here.
Mr. DeBoer. Mr. Van Hoof.
Here.
Any additions or subtractions to today's agenda?
I would make a motion for 9:30 to be tabled till a different date.
I'll support that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Then I would make a motion to approve the agenda.
And I'll support it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We take action on an agenda item that's not been approved as an agenda. Wouldn't we just not include it in the agenda?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yep. Whatever works.
So your motion is
Just to drop
the
that off the
agenda,
agenda.
dropping that off.
Yep.
All right. Jerry gives a
Yep.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Did you get that chance?
I think so.
Told you I wouldn't make any trouble.
Everybody got a chance to do the minute?
I'd make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll support that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approved pay increase for Austin Butler as deputy jailer and Shane Nellis as deputy jailer. Do you need one? Can you do that in one motion?
One motion should.
Motion to approve both of those.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approved 2024 conservation exemption feeders.
These are the ones we looked at the other day, wasn't it? Oh,
They're the ones from the other day. Okay.
I don't know what it is.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Support that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain from that.
Right? One abstention, motion carries. $850. Department heads. Kevin, we'll just start over here.
We had a deputy resignations last week, so we will be trying to find another one now.
Are you gonna use that, whatever that setup is to advertise that with
With the co-op?
Yeah,
Yeah, yep, that's what we've been doing, so.
had pretty good luck with that so far.
Well, the co-op tested end of March, and we had 17 applications. 11 showed up to take the test, 4 passed the test. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And out of those 4 that passed, with all the cities and counties that are included, there's 8 openings. So, and that was before we had ours. So we are gonna, since there's so few, we are gonna retest again at I think May 31st and June 1st. We're gonna run the test again. So.
How many times can you just keep retaking it if you don't pass?
Yeah, if you don't get enough names on the list, yeah, you can just keep on doing it, so.
How many times can one person take the test?
As many times as they want it. With the co-op, they charge $20 for you to take the test, so, I mean, it all depends on how much money you wanna spend to try to get it passed, so.
Oh, thank you. Becky?
Well, taxes were supposed to be collected March 31st, but I just looked and we have 98% collected, so we still about 2% out there, which is about $300,000. So we're waiting on that to come in. We will send out delinquent notices May 1st, so if they're not paid by then, they will get a notice. Also on April 25th, the office will be closed. We are attending a driver's license District 3 training in Denison. So we'll be closed on April 25th. Staying busy with drives, so we're doing a lot of drive tests.
You said that was, what date was that, May 31st?
April 25th.
Engineer?
Yes, so on the G20 bridge, the major concrete work is complete. Now we're going to be waiting for their subcontractor who will be doing the approach slab and the paving. They have not scheduled that work yet. They are, however, within their scheduled time and days that they're allowed in the contract. The 822 patch was delayed due to weather, but it is being poured this week. The truck shop was also delayed due to weather, but they did start today. They started trenching and footing. Equipment, our tandem trucks are still waiting, and the snow equipment is now not expected to be done. The trucks aren't expected to be done until mid-July. So we are going to continue to rent at least 1 truck from Greene County. We're going to return 1 now that the snow season's over. And that's about it.
Assessor?
April 1, assessment rolls went out, and we're now in the hearing informal protests until the 25th and formal protests until the 30th. It's not a real estate year, so we're not expecting much. We just sent out notices whether there was changes in values and some equity issues. But we did have to send all our assessment rolls to Ryan LLC, which we do every year, the tax rep. They're the ones that protest POET. They protested POET in the past, like 2 or 3 times, so they called, wanted to know what the deadline was, so we may hear from the tax rep, Ryan LLC. And then, yeah, before the trees get leaves on, we'll be out taking pictures, so.
Recorder?
Okay, we're busy with fishing, hunting license, and boats are coming through. Went down to the summer conference, and I just want to let you know that the Recorders Association is looking into increasing the recording document fees, and they haven't increased since 1985, so it's due time probably, but just so you're aware of it.
Nick?
Going out, cleaned up parks, picked up sticks, which is kind of a losing battle right now. Most of our burn equipment is ready. We're hoping to get one scrap fire, either kind of hoping to maybe light one this afternoon. If not, probably tomorrow. There's a dock to put in this afternoon out in May City. Our field trip season is coming. We have 3 different schools planning field trips out to Willow Creek. And I guess the biggest thing is that as of Thursday, the campground expansion project construction has started. And things really have ramped up quickly. out there. It started, they brought one load of pipe in, and then all of a sudden we got track hose and we're got sewer in the ground. So it's moving right along.
Economic development.
Good morning. So childcare, I'm now on the Bright Beginnings board. So I'm working with them to see the feasibility of possibly expanding their building, anything we can do to open up more childcare seats here in the county. We're working on marketing for Hawkeye Point, the community foundation, printing new brochures, getting all that information out. Career Day is on April 18th here at the Sibley Ocheetah School District. People, we've been reaching out, Sheriff's Department, Conservation are gonna be there in Chantry's, send out an invite to the other departments here in the courthouse. So hopefully we'll have some good representation here from the county. Then I have a meeting next week with some folks to try to find a way to move forward to get us a dentist. That's the last one fell through. That's all I have.
Deputy auditor.
Excuse me. Our office will also be closed on April 24th. We're all down in Storm Lake for training as well. And then our ballots for the primary election have been ordered. So that's kind of what we're working on.
I believe Nick brought donuts today.
I did.
Yes.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Did you get your whole speech in the minutes?
No, next week Tuesday.
I didn't see it. I thought maybe I missed it or
Oh,
something.
no, we moved it to next week.
Yep.
Rod was gonna be gone.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Approve the 24-25 secondary road and DOT budget.
As you're aware, the state DOT requires that the secondary roads submits both a 5-year plan and a budget each year to be reviewed and approved by the state. The secondary road budget, there are no changes from the January 23rd budget that you reviewed. This has really just simply been put into the DOT format.
I'd make a motion to approve it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approve the secondary road 5-year plan.
So the 5-year plan is unchanged from last year, and when you look at it broadly, because we were able to secure funding from the Regional Planning Authority last year. We won't go back to the Regional Planning Authority for another couple of years. It takes us every few years to build up our account balances to be able to do the match. So what we did do in this 5-year plan going forward is it does reflect the $919,000 we secured last year from the RPA. So that was a minor change. And then related to the differences between the federal and the state fiscal years, we are moving up the bridge replacement of the DFW bridge from FY28 to FY27 just because of when it will actually bid with the federal fiscal year. But the project is unchanged at this time. We will, however, continue to evaluate the cost of that project as it goes through design. It may increase in cost as we get closer. The paving of 830 east of Sibley was the project that had to be kicked from this fiscal year due to our farm to market account balances, so it is still showing up in FY25. And then the bridge F10 south of Sibley on Pierce Avenue remains the same as the previous 5-year program. So not a lot of changes, just clarifying when things are being done.
Where's 834 on the 5-year plan?
834 is something that we're going to request in the next round, which will probably be about 2 years, which would be for FY30. However, we are looking at doing some slurry work or some other type of work on it, at least at the intersections where the rutting is starting to show, to try to kick that road along until we can get it into the program.
That stretch from Ashton to Highway 59 is pretty rough.
The Ashton to 59 is in this asphalt program this year.
In this year.
That's in this one. It's from 59 to, out towards, to the east that we're gonna have to get into the next program.
That's all the questions I had. I'll take a motion.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll support it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 9 o'clock. We'll open the public hearing for the amended right-of-way ordinance number 64.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I can give you an update on changes from the last time we looked at this on February. Based on comment received from the board, we did update the definition for board member Van Hoop on private versus public, make sure it had both those in there. Also, we added a prohibition from hanging these utilities on bridges. They would have to go under creeks and things like that. And then lastly, I have been in contact with Summit Carbon Solutions regarding sleeving of pipes, and they had proposed that we not do sleeving because it can impact their cathodic protection and lead to more degradation of pipes in the long run. And the industry standard is moving more towards thicker walled pipe as opposed to sleeving of pipes. So I did do some research into that and had some discussions. So I have added language that would allow that. However, there are different factors of safety that are used for the calculations of the wall thicknesses. You have a standard wall thickness that's used out in fields. There's a higher factor of safety that's used under roadways, which leads to a thicker pipe. And then lastly, there's an even higher factor of safety for under railroads, which is even thicker. So I am proposing that if we are going to not have a sleeve and we're going to allow a thicker walled pipe, that we take it to the higher classification, essentially getting the railroad gets, is what I'm proposing, and that's what the language is reading in here. So that's the changes that are in the language of the proposed ordinance. And sleeving is still not.
I don't know.
Do you want one of these?
Yeah, step out.
So would this be the first reading then of this ordinance? So we're gonna do 2 more, or are we gonna waive them?
I believe the intent was to do the second reading, the next board meeting, and then waive the third.
Any comments from the public on the right-of-way?
Can I make a comment? My name's Kylie Lang. I'm the project manager for the state of Iowa with Summit Carbon Solutions. Not usually how I do an introduction, but I want to talk specifically about that factor of safety that was just discussed. If you guys are a little bit familiar, how we described it is correct. There's a certain factor of safety that you use in a standard lay, which is 0.72, which just means you're allowed to use up to 72% of the yield strength of that pipe. When we go onto roads, we go to 0.6, so 60%, and when we go into railroads, we go to 0.5, which is 50%. So there's some reasons behind why we do those. We'll talk first about the roads. The reason we go from the 0.72 to the 0.6 safety factor is because of the strain on the pipe during the boring process itself. You also lay the pipe a little bit deeper, so you have that heavier dead load of this constant soil. You also have the live load right of the transportation that travels across the road. So you just go to a heavier wall. When you go to a railroad, you go significantly deeper. You have that much more dead load. You also have vibrations in your dead load because of the heaviness of the live load, which is the trains traversing across the pipeline. So you go to that heavier wall. To go from a 0.72, which is our standard lay, to a 0.5, you cannot weld those two pieces next to each other. The wall differences are too great to make it one connecting weld. So you have to go to a transition piece. So you have to come in with a non-standard piece of pipe, which heavier, thicker on one side, thinner on the other. And you have to add 2 welds to make the connection work. Does that kind of make sense? So there's an added risk by adding that transition piece. When we're talking about railroads, there's more benefit because of the weight of the railroad itself than risk because of that transition piece. But when we're just talking about a standard roadway, we're adding the risk of a transition piece if we move to that 0.5 wall without getting any of the benefit, because you won't have those vibrations and those extremely heavy live loads that will traverse it. So you're adding the heavier walls. Sounds like it's always more safer because it's heavier wall. But by not allowing one weld to do the work and having to add that transition piece, we're just adding an extra risk that doesn't see value in it. So I just ask that you kind of look.
Value for you, and peace of mind for the public.
But peace of mind versus risk, there's a factor of that where 2 welds versus 1 weld.
So just sleeve it then.
Just sleeve it.
Sleeve it.
Sleeve it. Happy to talk about sleeving and why the industry's moved away from it, if we want to talk about that as well. But what we say, I think a good way to look at it, instead of looking at the railroads who have actually also gone away from sleeving for the safety factor, is looking at the Iowa DOT and their requirements and what they require for the highway crossings. It's just, and they are good with that 0.6 safety factor, not sleeving it. The railroads, although we'll use that 0.5 because of the vibration and the loads, are also good with not sleeving it. Just food for thought on, it may seem safer because it's thicker wall pipe, but because of that transition piece, you're adding extra welds and extra risk without getting any benefit, because the pipe that's there has the full capability to handle the loads that will be driven with a road, with just a standard
So you're
roadway.
not confident in your welds, or?
It's just that more welds is more risk every time. It's also a non-standard piece of pipe that you bring in for that transition piece. It's not something the welders do every day. It's not that we're not confident, it's just risk for no benefit.
So Brent Neese, I'm also a Summit on the integrity side. So just talking about when we're looking at the live loading. So when you look at roads, you're looking at the potential loading you could get from the dirt, as well as your axle loads from, if you're going to go with semis or anything. For railroads, you're going to look at your Cooper E80 live loading, which is going to be based upon what you can see from the railroad. And then, as Kylie mentioned, it's going to be a little bit deeper there. What the DOT does is they basically say if it's going to be welded pipe and cathodically protected, you can go with uncased pipe because of the strength of the steel itself. But their caveat in their language says it needs to equal industry best practices, and you need to show that it can withstand the forces and the pressures that you go with. And I know I shared with Keith and we kind of show the calculations, but it's not just us saying 0.6 across the board. It's us saying, here's the calculations that we're running for each individual case to show here's the different scenarios that it should be seen, and then even putting an additional factor of safety on top of that. And that's why you're kind of designing the pipe for the best use that it's going to see. It's the reason we don't go 30 feet deep, because at that point, you're not really getting any extra protection that deep down in the ground. You're actually impacting the ground more when you go to dig it. So we're designing the pipe that says, well, we know the potential forces that it'll see from the ground, from the potential loading from the traffic. We put the factor of safety in there for the thickness, we know that it's gonna be okay there. And that's why for a railroad, we actually have to bump it up because of those potential forces. But as Kylie mentioned, if we can reduce welds and design the pipe exactly for the right use, that's what we like to do in the pipeline industry, just to make sure that we're cohesive across the board.
But looking at the size and weight of all the farm equipment these days, and just saying that your heaviest load on there is gonna be a semi isn't really accurate.
So if you actually look at the 0.72 that we put in the right of way, so 4 feet down, we're not worried about that loading going across there from fully loaded grain cart, combines, even semis running in the field. At 4 feet down, you're gonna dissipate all of that force on top of it. And at roads, we're actually going 5 feet from the bottom of the ditch line. So we're actually going an additional foot at roads already. And then we're also adding an additional thickness. So if we're even talking about farm equipment, we would be good at the normal factor of safety of 0.72 and at 4 feet. And at roadways, we're actually going above that even. So again, when we're talking about that live loading of even the axles, I'm saying that's just what we need to show compliance for. But in the calculations, you can actually see it's going above that. And that's why I use the 0.6, just because that's kind of standard practice, because you are going to be boring it. And if there's a load loading, we have to show the DOT that can withstand all those forces. And so that's what we're trying to say, is we're not trying to say, well, yeah, the 0.5 because we don't want to. We're saying if we can maximize our design for the use of that pipe in that location, it makes sense. Eliminate a transition weld where we're not having a super thick pipe next to a normal pipe, and that welding is just going to be different. It's consistent welding. We know it's going to be easy to go out there and repair. Like I said, when we go out there and repair it, if there would need to be a repair, you'd have to actually use different sleeve material. Usually it's going to be special ordered. And the other thing is when you go through the repair process, it's going to be standard across the board. It's all about consistency.
You have to transition after you go underneath the railroad at some point.
For a railroad, yeah, like I said, you would transition it, but you want to limit those transitions as much as possible. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. If you can minimize it, and at the same time showing that it'll withstand all the forces that it could see at that location. So what I'm saying is it's already over designed with the 0.6, and the 0.5 isn't giving us any additional benefit.
Why do they require it then?
For the 0.5? Because like you said, for a road, you're actually going a lot deeper underneath. So for a road, you're going to be doing what's called, a road bore. And so usually you're going up to basically a smaller drill underneath the road. But for a actual railroad, it's going to be a horizontal directional drill. So it's actually a lot longer drill going through. We're going to have to pull it through with reed rods a few times. So you're like, you go a small pilot hole through, and you continually scale up that size. And that 0.5 is because we're a lot deeper in the ground. The loading of a railroad is going to be a little bit heavier, and that's what the Coupe 80 live loading is what it's called. And then we're also going to be dragging that through, so we have extra coating on top of that pipeline as well, the aero coating. So it's just, again, the designing for the aspect of what it's going to potentially see at that location, when it'll never see that amount of dirt on top of it or that loading at a roadway compared to a railroad.
I guess I don't see the issue. If you can do it for one, you can do it for the other.
It's not that you can't do it, it's not that it's impossible to do, we'll have that 0.5.
You just don't want to.
It's that it's an added risk with no benefit. You're adding a weld, you're adding a non-standard piece of pipe, that transition piece, when none of the calculations, there is no indicator that there's value added, but we know we're adding risk.
And evidently the railroad sees value in it.
It's the live loading of the railroad that you'll never see on a road, as well as the extra dead load of the soil because of the depth that you have to go under to avoid the vibrations of a railroad. It's just a different design. As you mentioned, it's the horizontal directional drill versus the standard bore. There is value in it on a railroad. I don't even know if railroads require it. That's just what we do underneath railroads. And the transition piece adds risk at the railroad, but there's more benefit than there is risk, which is not true at a standard road crossing, which I think the DOT would agree with.
Running utilities, I know under railroads, they do make you sleeve it.
I think it depends on what the actual utility is. If it's going to be, like I said, a welded steel pipe, and if it's cathodically protected, usually there's different rules or best industry practices along with that. And that's why I think the DOT kind of uses that language of, if it's welded pipe, if it's cathodically protected to help out with the corrosion, then you will follow best industry practices, and show that it can withstand the stresses. It's not, you will use design factor X. It says, well, what if the best industry practices changes? We want to make sure that you're following best industry practices, and you also have to show us in your calculations that it meets the stresses. So that's why they use that language of, it's not a standard thickness, it's a standard practices and shows your calculations. And if you don't meet those calculations, then you have to bump up your wall thickness. So it's not really even a wall thickness or design factor of safety that DOT does. They say, show us your calculations and your stresses.
Well, there's the DOT way that they want to do things, and there's the county way that they want to do things, and I guess I just leave it up to
We're in a
the
public
engineer.
hearing, can we receive comment and then discuss the item when we're considering a vote on the issue?
We're not voting on it.
Okay.
We have to have a second reading. Any other comments?
We do, I guess just to mention, we did have POTUS here as well, if you guys have any questions for them. I realize this is a little more technical than normal conversations, but they're here and welcome to answer questions.
You don't have all the answers for that?
Sorry, I don't have all the answers. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and here supporting, certainly supporting Summit's efforts and their view of this particular issue.
Any other comments? We'll close the public hearing, and you said this will get read again on the,
Given there's no changes, the second reading is anticipated for the next meeting, the 23rd.
It says this is the first consideration. The item says that it's passed and approved by motion for the first ordinance reading. So I'm under the assumption that we would have a vote on this reading, but just a comment.
I don't ever remember voting on it until we voted on it to either waive the readings or approve it, but
I just have a question. Is there a big problem with going to the 6 instead of the 5? Is that a big problem?
Going to 5 versus 6?
Yeah.
Well, there's an increased cost and additional weld of a coupler type unit.
But with the 6, that'd be okay too, to go with that? Because your recommendation was.
My recommendation is to use the 0.5.
Yeah.
And when they mention increased risk or an added risk without an added value, what's your response to that?
Well, I believe pipe generally comes in 20 to 40 foot lengths, so there's a lot of welds out there. I don't see one additional weld, although it is a coupler weld of a non-standard piece, as they say. However, you're talking about an upfront constructability issue that has to be tested and certified versus a long time issue that we have to deal with for an added factor of safety, which is why I would recommend the 0.5.
thus concludes the first reading of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Not quite 9:30. Oh, no, we took the 9:30 off.
Yeah.
Did you identify a date for that to be moved to, or just removed it from the agenda? I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Not a date yet. See when the attorneys can get it in their schedule.
And what did you say the second reading would be, Chantry?
I believe the second reading was anticipated the next meeting, the 23rd.
Does that also have to be publicly noticed? Is there like a time frame?
When I had talked to Nolan, he said no.
Just the first one?
Yep.
Okay.
So we didn't go over anything on this one today.
Passed and approved by motion of first ordinance reading, so I believe it necessary.
I'll revise that. I'll revise that for the next meeting.
Which,
Approve the Thomas Pitt Farm lease.
This lease is based off of a bid for price per acre that was given last year. We did have an adjustment due to the amount of gravel mining that was performed for Thomas Pitt, so the amount went down slightly, but the gross amount went down slightly. The price per acre of the lease remains the same. And this lease will carry through another year beyond this year. It's about $9,000.
It's like year to year, or?
It's a 3-year lease.
Would you guys mind making sure the auditor's office knows your name and exactly what your comment, you'd like your comment reflected in the minutes? So she doesn't have to make sure she accurately keep her.
I can give you your email address. I'll email you mine.
Okay, that works.
That'd be great. Thank you.
You wanna make a motion on that, or? 'Cause I think he's gonna abstain.
Oh, about just agreeing to this.
It's worked out well. I mean, this is the second go-around of this farmer doing this lease, so we've had no issues.
Okay, I'll make a motion to extend this lease.
Take a second. I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All those abstaining,
Aye.
motion carries. Consider open forum be added to the board's agenda. I think to have a public comment period maybe at the beginning of the meeting, rather than trying to make appointments and arrangements with the auditor's office. And if nobody shows up during public comment time, other counties have public comment at the beginning of the meetings.
What, do they have, like a 5 or 10 minute deal, or what?
Yeah, it's like 5-10 minutes, but if nobody shows up, it's not a timed agenda item. So you just move on to the next thing on the agenda, but I think it would make everything more accessible to the public. And it would be easier to confine the comments to that beginning portion of the meeting, but.
The only question I have is, if people come in and they want to talk for a half hour, how do you stop them?
You give them a time limit. I think most boards have anywhere between 2 to 4 minutes for comments per person.
With a total time limit of what, 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Probably 10 minutes.
I've wrestled with this thought for a long time. I absolutely don't mind hearing from the public. I think we're elected representatives. It's reasonable to have them reach out to us too, and we can bring it. I don't think it's overly problematic to ask to be on the agenda, and we've seen very little restriction as to being on the agenda, but then we know what's coming, and others in the public that are interested in that can be notified and be aware that it would be talked about. When it's just an open forum, public comment, I'm concerned you're going to have interaction. If it's not noticed, if it's not given the general public the opportunity to know that item's going to be discussed, then you open yourself up to potential open meetings violations, and that's my concern. I absolutely want to hear from the public, and I don't mind it, but we set an agenda, have a meeting for discussion and action amongst the elected board. So the open-endedness of it and a natural tendency to respond to something that's said or asked, it concerns it creates too many potential problems or issues.
not everybody wants to talk about whatever we have on the agenda that day. Other people just have comments about general things going on with the county. So I don't know that it matters that it's not something that we're talking about that day if you want to come in and have your piece. But it would be easier to have that at the beginning of the meeting than when you do have somebody on the agenda and it ends up as an open-ended discussion that goes on for a half hour. It would be nice to just kind of have that corral done at the beginning. And if you still wanted to be on the agenda for a particular item, it doesn't prevent you from doing that, but not everybody wants to make an appointment, to get on the agenda.
Agreed, but just because someone wants to say their piece doesn't mean there's not someone else that would like to address that piece as well. So to know that issue may be on the agenda is only fair to the entire public. Or else you're running back and forth, one meeting to the next, and someone else comes with the opposing view, and then the next meeting. Then I suppose it can rise to the level that we decide to put on the agenda, but I think it's better to have a posted agenda so that everyone knows what's going to be discussed. And I absolutely ask everyone to reach out to me if they have things they want the board to hear about or the supervisors to know.
I think it just makes things more accessible to the public if you could just come to a meeting. It don't have to be on the agenda. Come in, say your piece, whether we're doing a good job or a bad job. I don't know that it's agenda driven or agenda dependent on whether or not you have a public comment period. Like I said, there's a lot of counties that do have a public comment period at the beginning of their meetings to make it more accessible to the public. But
Myself, I'd rather not make that decision today.
I don't disagree that it's fine if they make comment. My concern is that we're going to run into situations where we're inclined to, or we do respond or begin discussion on it, and we should not discuss an item the public was not notified would be being considered by the board.
Well, there just wouldn't be any comment from the board.
I've seen it happen, so I'm concerned it would happen again. That's where I think it's a better practice to not open that door.
Well, it's different if it's a public hearing, Jason, or if you're already on the agenda.
It's not just public hearings. Last week, we were asked to show a copy of a signed oath. That was on the agenda, that was responded to. There are plenty of ways that would open doors that it just, to me, causes more potential problems than value. And it's not to limit the public's involvement or to hear from them in any way, shape, or form. It's a conduct of meeting and propriety. So that's my stance on sharing when I will.
And the only concern I would raise just from the point of view of the legal issues that you can end up with is if we have an open public comment period and there's discussion back and forth between supervisors and a citizen, really at that point, we are talking about unnoticed items that haven't been followed through the period of when we post what we're talking about. And that's been a concern, I think, since the last time this was brought up, even perhaps before my time. I think it's fine if there's a period when somebody in the public wants to come and make statements to the board, but what it comes down to is it's the five of you who are gonna have to exercise discipline not to have a back and forth. I think that the example of what occurred last week, obviously it's not like I'm here to be, thinking some shining example, but if you recall, George wanted to have a back and forth, and I explicitly made it my point to not have that. That has to be kind of the rule if you guys are gonna do that. And that would just be my input for that.
It's not like we'd be voting on anything that anybody brought up to discuss on during public comment. So I don't know where you get the open meetings violation.
I think if you'd read the open meeting section, it says that the public has the right to know what's going to be discussed, not just what's voted on, but if there's deliberation. The public deserves to know what we're going to be talking about and be able to come hear that.
Do we get in trouble when we do allow someone?
Because it's no different than just letting some random person walk in here and allowing them to speak in the middle of some topic.
And then it goes off. I think we have that ability now. We run our meetings, so if we want to allow a comment because someone came, because usually there's nobody from the public here. So if someone shows up, it's kind of an indicator that, they probably want us to hear something.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know how big an issue it would be to have public comment at the beginning of the meeting.
But to me, having it as an open public comment period would create more of an understanding that there's going to be some discourse, some back and forth. And I think it's more reasonable to say, they're here for a reason. Would you like to share something with us? We cannot discuss the issue. Versus we're opening up a public comment period. I think people will come and expect interaction. And
And maybe if you make it a practice to say, you know, we have a public comment period, it's not a discussion period. Board members are, because of, you know, open meetings laws, the board members are not at liberty to have a back and forth discussion with you. However, this is your time as a citizen to express what you may view or feel as current issues with Osceola County government. Each participant is limited to however many minutes. There you go, have at it. And then people have an idea what your ground rules are, and then we're not going to have a back and forth, and then you avoid that issue. Give people the opportunity to voice their concerns. It becomes a practice that you have where there are ground rules, where you know that people can come and voice their concerns, and you limit them so that you don't end up with people soapboxing, tirading, whatever, what have you, and it is expected that there won't be a back and forth. I think that's probably a good compromise if you're dedicated to having a public comment period.
And that's how other counties do it, that have public comment in their meetings. This is exactly how Nolan laid it out.
But you gotta have those barriers, otherwise I think, given kind of what we've seen historically, you're gonna have some issues, so.
That food for thought, we can talk about it again on a later date, but.
Because what scares me is we've been turned in for the open meetings already, so that was a few years back, but. Yeah, like I say, I don't want to make a decision today.
Everything gets, it's no, like, I don't know how to shut those conversations down to get so far off topic of what you let somebody talk about, and then it just kind of.
Yeah.
I guess really at the heart of it, it's more just putting restrictions on ourselves so we don't get in trouble as a board. It's not wanting to avoid hearing from the public. It's doing this the best possible way to avoid.
I agree with that, because it's, once in a while it's hard to keep your mouth shut.
What? All right, well, thanks for your consideration and discussion on that topic. Consider bid for the VA office remodel.
And I don't think I have those in there, but I think Rochelle emailed you guys all before when they were trying to do the window things. Yeah, it's the same bid. She ordered the pre-finished, the sill work or whatever for the windows and the trim around the windows, I believe, but none of the doors were ordered. And I think those were running that's just shy of $700 each. So there's that storeroom that we have down there, and then the VA's office would have a door, and we were trying to get the similar style to like the, you know how I guess they're a little different up here than they are downstairs, but the designing and the kind of get the similar look through there. But Buffy's for the VA, they're gonna take the one panel out in the middle and have a window in, because if she's behind closed doors dealing with a veteran and something happens or whatever, you know, it'd be nice to have some safety there just for that factor, or you know, for, you know, it doesn't quite claustrophobic your office so much, close it off so much, but so those are the only things I think. So, and then the break room door.
So we're approving the window bid?
No, the windows are done. Those are ordered. They're on order, and they'll come pre-finished. So once they get here, then he'll be able to get them in and keep moving down there. It's the doors.
There's 3 doors, right?
It'd be 3 doors.
At about $700 a piece.
Yeah. Yep. And I think I do have a copy of that if you guys wanted to. It's the same thing that was emailed, so if anybody wanted to look at it, it's.
I remember reading it, I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, so if you wanted to look at it, you can. He's hoping to have it painted and like the walls, if you guys have been down there to see him yet, like, I think he's got the walls all in. He's hoping to have them painted by tomorrow. So
You know, the doors that were down there before didn't match anything either.
that's true. Yeah.
The doors in the office there to the sanitary and then economic development don't match anything either.
Yep. That's true. So are you suggesting a different style of door then,
I
or?
don't know if you need a $700 interior door. That seems awfully steep, but that's just my thought.
But I'd like them to look the same or close.
You could make them the same as the one in the economic development office and the sanitarian's office. Then they all match. Cause you're talking a solid core door.
Those ones are, I do believe, yeah. And I don't think anybody's opposed to.
And one of
other
them's just for
suggestions.
storage, right?
Yeah.
For the VA's office, it'd be good to have a more solid door for privacy and confidentiality and items. I know Rochelle's stressed over every aspect of this, so I support if she wants to.
I think the thought process behind it is kind of, we're having a historic building. I mean, keep up the aesthetics of it, but
We're gonna swap
I
out the
understand
doors
what
down
you're
in the other room that don't match.
If that was a motion, Jason, I'd support it.
I'll make the motion to proceed as presented.
And support.
I'll support it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Quarterly reports. I think that's just an FYI, right?
It is, yeah, yep.
Keep it up, auditor's office, I like that 90,000.
Well, Sheila, she better step it up.
Oh, I'll be sure to
Been
do
doing that
that.
for a long time, it doesn't take.
Well, once they increase the recording fees, it'll go up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Should have asked her, but is that something they just can do as an association? I'm guessing the legislature has to prove, they're trying to get the legislature to do that.
I don't know, think, yeah, if they'd come up with a recommendation that.
So if they recommend it now, maybe in 2048, we'll see action on it.
If we're lucky. What is all under the other? Am I supposed to have answers?
I don't have an answer for you. I don't do the report, but Barb might have some insight.
Oh, passport fees, no, that's. I'm just kind of curious what other would be. Okay. If I look, the other is right there.
Oh, there you go, medical cleaning.
That's the big one.
I think the engineer's office wins the award for largest claim by department again this year.
Overall, low.
Was it?
60 is about, that's about the low end for us. Which claim are you talking about?
Just total claim is 68.
Departmental blew you out of the water this time.
66 was non-departmental. So you even beat that.
Well, 33,000 of it was each file for a bridge. So half of it is for one item.
I take a motion on claims.
Roswell Water Service has claims 1666 and 1667.
I'll make a motion on those two.
Support. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All those abstaining.
Abstaining.
Motion carries. I take a motion on the rest of the claims.
I'll make the motion on the claims.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So then, are we doing that closed session?
I believe so. Mike, I think you had originally discussed having that closed session item. Is that still something that you wanted to discuss?
Shit, I forgot what that was about. Oh, yes. Yeah, I'd like to have that closed session.
Mr. Schulte?
Aye.
Mr. Helmers?
Aye.
Mr. DeBoer?
Thanks for reminding me,
Mr.
mine
Van
was
de
blank.
Aye.
Well, she reminded me of that.
Aye.
All about it.
So I guess we're going to closed session.
Our jails are 18% overfull, so you can be looking for,
Don't they got that new jail open up in Sioux City?
oh, they've run into so much trouble there. But they're trying to figure out a way to get it down to 15% over, and the only way they can do that is when people out. So I'm just giving you a heads up that you're probably gonna see some prisoners getting out, like it or not. But that was the interesting part of my week last week.
Which ones do they decide to keep and which ones do they decide to let go?
That's still up for discussion. It's the non-violent ones are the ones that are gonna be up first. I'd like to see it get down to 15% over for right now.
Is it always about that full or?
Yeah, it's always full and overfull. That's why, 3 years ago or so, I think they released about 600. Yeah, yep. There. I'm done.
Public Health, I'll just note that Pam Juber sent out a notice of her intended retirement. I think it was August. She notified the hospital. So I haven't reached out to the hospital. I would assume they would look to fill that and continue the way it's gone.
There's a
Notify
lot
if it's
of
different.
retired out of our surrounding counties.
Kinda wondered when her husband retired. I figured she wouldn't be too far behind.
That and the state reorganization, I'm sure is gonna.
That's what prompted all the
They
rest of
look
it.
into it too, but
So are they gonna hire someone to replace her?
I've not reached out to them. She actually, I mean, her letter or email said she submitted a resignation to the CEO of the hospital, so it would be their call initially, assuming they would continue what's been done, but.
They're still not fully staffed in that office from where they were. I think they only hired back one of the two nurses. And because she was without for quite some time, we ended up not being able to provide the services for that Best Care for Better Babies. And she gave us back $30,000 at the last meeting. So the hospital needs to get somebody in there.
The way Dan Berkman was talking, that they are gonna start looking.
I hate giving money back.
Yeah. And I'll visit with Brett and them to see when they want to set up and have them get ahold of you guys.
Anything else? If not, I'd take a motion.
I'll make that motion.
All those in favor?
Hi.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then I guess at 10:15, you gotta call Spencer?
I do have to call him. He said he is available after, and it does say we can start